The Empire had ruled the stars for 11,000 years. Their territory stretched across 3 galactic arms, 12,000 worlds flew their banner, their fleets numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Their technology had crushed every rival that dared to challenge them. So when the scouts brought news of a small species called Terran claiming a patch of space near the galactic rim, the High Council barely paid attention. "How many worlds?" asked Grand Executive, not looking up from the reports on his desk. 47 confirmed colonies, replied Intelligence Director, perhaps 60 at most, including outposts and stations. Made a dismissive sound, and they sit directly in our expansion corridor too. The mineral reach, they do. Grand Executive, the mineral reach contained enough rare elements to fuel the Empire's growth for another 1,000 years. That had already surveyed it, already made plans. The only obstacle was this sliver of space, claimed by creatures who had apparently crawled out of their gravity, well, barely 3 centuries ago. Finally looked up. Send diplomats, explain reality to them. They can relocate their colonies, or they can watch them burn, their choice. The diplomatic mission departed within the week. They sent their finest negotiators aboard a cruiser escorted by 20 warships. They wanted the Terran to understand exactly who they were dealing with. The Terran response came 17 days later. It was not delivered by diplomats. It was not accompanied by counter-offers or requests for meetings. It was a single transmission broadcast on all frequencies in every known language. Terran space is sovereign. Entry without authorization is forbidden. All vessels approaching Terran borders will receive 1 warning. Trespassers will not be warned twice. They will be destroyed. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. The message was signed by something called the Terran Union Security Council. Grand Executive read it 3 times, then he began to laugh. They threaten us. He passed the message to his advisors. 47 worlds threatened. 12,000. The laughter spread through the council chamber. Only one voice remained silent. Elder Counselor, the oldest member of the High Council, studied the message with narrowed eyes. "There is something strange here," she said quietly. "No species this small should speak with such certainty." "They are fools," said Admiral Commander of the 3rd Expansion Fleet. "Young species often mistake bravado for strength. A demonstration will correct their misunderstanding." Nodded slowly. "What do you propose?" Stood his ceremonial armor gleaming under the chamber lights. He had conquered 11 species in his career. He had never lost a campaign. "Give me 300 ships," he said. "I will enter their territory, proceed to their capital, and deliver our terms in person. When they see real power, they will submit. They always do." Elder spoke again. "Admiral, I advise caution. We know almost nothing about these Terran. Our intelligence is limited to basic scans and intercepted communications." "What is there to know?" replied. "They have no significant military presence. Their technology appears adequate but unremarkable. Their expansion has been slow and careful, the mark of a timid species. They will fold the moment they see our fleet." The vote was unanimous, except for the 3rd Expansion Fleet would enter Terran space and secure the corridor to the mineral reach. Admiral assembled his forces at the border staging area. 300 warships, including his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. 50,000 crew members, enough firepower to crack a planet's crust, as they prepared to cross the border, addressed his captains via fleet-wide transmission. Today we remind the galaxy why the rule, he said, these Terran have made threats they cannot support. We will show them the consequence of such arrogance. By tomorrow their leaders will kneel before us, begging for terms. The fleet moved forward in perfect formation as they crossed the invisible line marking Terran territory. Automated beacons activated around them. Dozens of small satellites positioned at regular intervals began broadcasting. Warning, you are entering sovereign Tan space. You have not received authorization for this incursion. Turn back immediately. This is your only warning. Trespassers will be destroyed. The message repeated in the language perfectly pronounced, without emotion. Watch the nearest beacon on his display screen. It was a simple device, barely worth noticing. Destroy them, he ordered. Weapons fire lanced out from the forward ships. Beacons exploded in small flashes of light, one after another. Within minutes they were all gone. Continue. Advance commanded full speed to their capital system. The fleet pushed deeper into Terran space. Hours passed, then days. They encountered nothing. No patrol ships, no defensive stations, no colonies. Their sensors detected settlements on nearby worlds, but they appeared empty. Life signs were minimal or absent. It was as if the entire population had simply vanished. Lieutenant Commander approached on the third day. Admiral, the scouts report the same findings. Everywhere, abandoned structures, no resistance, no contact of any kind. Frowned, they are hiding, cowering in their holes while we pass. It changes nothing, but something gnawed at him. He had conquered timid species before. They sent desperate messages pleading for mercy. They attempted ambushes that failed. They did something. The Terran did nothing. They simply watched. On the fourth day, the fleet reached what intelligence had identified as the Terran capital system, a single yellow star orbited by 8 planets. The third planet from the star showed signs of heavy development, but they were heading for something else. A massive station orbited the largest gas giant. It was the only structure they had encountered that showed active power signatures. Scan it, ordered. Minimal weapons detected, reported his tactical officer. Civilian design, snorts. It appears to be an administrative facility. Smiled. Open communications, demand their surrender. The transmission went out. For long moments there was silence, then the screen flickered and a face appeared. It was a human, an elderly female with gray hair and deep lines around her eyes. She wore simple civilian clothing. Behind her, the station's command center was visible, staffed by humans who watch with calm expressions. I am Director Sarah, the woman said. I speak for the Terran Union. I am Admiral of the Empire. You will surrender your territory immediately. Your people will evacuate the expansion corridor. Failure to comply will result in the destruction of your species. Director studied him for a long moment. There was no fear in her eyes, no anger. Just a deep, weary sadness that did not understand. You destroyed our warning beacons, she said. You proceeded into our space. Despite clear notification of the consequences, you have come here with weapons armed and threats ready. I have come to accept your submission. Shook her head slowly. Admiral, you were warned. Your government was warned. Every step of the way, you were told. Exactly what would happen, you chose not to listen. Is that supposed to frighten me? No, said, nothing I say will frighten you. You are beyond warnings. Now she paused and something shifted in her expression. May whatever gods your people believe in grant you mercy. Admiral, we will not. The transmission ended. The station's lights flickered once, then went completely dark. Opened his mouth to give an order, but they words never came. Across the entire system something was waking up. His tactical displays exploded with new contacts, hundreds of them, then thousands emerging from hiding spots his sensors had somehow missed. And deep in the void between stars, 12 fleets that had been waiting in silence for 3 centuries received a single command. The word was simple. The word was final. Respond. Captain had spent her entire adult life preparing for a day she hoped would never come. 23 years in the Terran Navy, 15 years commanding warships, 8 years leading the second response fleet from the bridge of the TNS Prometheus. She was 49 years old, and she had never fired a weapon in anger. That was about to change. The alert had reached her fleet 6 days ago. A force had crossed into Tan space, 300 warships heading for Sol system. The warning beacons had been destroyed. All attempts at communication had been rejected. Condition absolute had been declared. Stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, surrounded by officers who shared her calm. They had trained for this. Every drill, every simulation, every sleepless night studying enemy tactics had led to this moment. Status report, she said. All ships report ready, Captain, replied Commander Tour, her executive officer. Weapons charged, stealth systems active. We are invisible to their sensors. The other response fleets confirmed in position, 12 fleets forming a sphere around the enemy formation, 4,000 ships. Total 4,000 against 300. It seemed excessive. But Terran military doctrine did not believe in fair fights. Thought about how her people had reached this point. 300 years since humanity had first ventured beyond Earth. 300 years of careful expansion, quiet diplomacy, and silent preparation. The galaxy had not been kind to young species. Humanity had learned that lesson early. They had been the first to test them, a slaving empire that saw humans as nothing more than livestock. They had arrived at Earth's doorstep with demands and chains. They had left in ashes. The Confederation had come next, seeking to absorb human territory into their collective. Then the they burning fleet, the syndicate of whispers. 9 civilizations had looked at humanity and seen prey. 9 civilizations had learned the truth. Humanity did not fight like other species. They did not believe in honor, duels, or match fleets or proportion. Response: when their existence was threatened, they responded with everything they had. Total commitment, absolute force, complete annihilation of the enemy's ability to threaten them. Again, it was not cruelty, it was survival. Pulled up the historical files. On her personal display, she had read them 100 times, but she needed to remind herself why she was here. Earth, 21st century, a world that had nearly destroyed itself through war, disease, and environmental collapse. Humanity had stared into the void of extinction and somehow pulled back from the edge. They had carried the scars of that experience into space. Never again, they had promised themselves, never again would they be caught unprepared. Never again would they trust in the goodwill of others to ensure their survival. So they built quietly, patiently. They built fleets that they hid in the spaces. Between stars, they developed weapons that they hoped they would never use. They trained soldiers who prayed for peace but prepared for war, and they warned everyone. Every species that encountered humanity received the same message: Terran space is sovereign, do not trespass, we do not want conflict, we will not seek to conquer you, but if you come for us, we will destroy you. Most species listened. They saw something in human eyes that made them cautious, a hardness born from too many close calls with oblivion. But some species did not listen. Some looked at humanity's small territory and modest public military and saw weakness. Thor were the 10th to make that mistake. Captain Tor said, breaking her thoughts. The enemy fleet has reached Sol's system. They are approaching Director Station. Nodded, she activated the fleet-wide channel. Her face appeared on screens. Across 4,000 ships, this is Captain, but now you have all seen the situation. They have invaded our space. They have ignored our warnings. They have come to take what is ours and kill anyone who resists. She paused, letting the words settle. We did not ask for this fight. We sent them messages explaining exactly what would happen if they crossed our borders. We gave them every opportunity to turn back. They chose to come anyway. Around her, the bridge crew listened in silence. Many of them had family on the colonies the fleet had passed, family that had been evacuated days ago, following protocols established generations before. Our doctrine is clear: we do not fight fair, we do not accept surrender once battle begins, we do not stop until the threat is eliminated. This is not cruelty, this is necessity. Every species that has attacked us learned that lesson, that will learn it today. She straightened in her command chair. You know your duties. You know why we fight for Earth, for our colonies, for every human being who trusts us to keep them safe. Execute protocol absolute. May God forgive us for what we must do. The channel closed. Across the hidden fleet, weapon systems went from standby to active. Jump drives powered up, targeting computers locked onto 300 warships that had no idea death was coming. In Sol's system, Director ended her transmission with Admiral. She had seen his arrogance, his certainty that he was dealing with lesser beings. She had seen that look before in historical recordings that had worn it. So had thee and all the others. They had all learned. Turned to her staff. Begin evacuation. All personnel to the emergency shuttles. The fleet will be here in 4 minutes. Director, one of her aides said, what about you? I will be on the last shuttle. Move. They moved. The station emptied in minutes. Shuttles launching toward safe points that they did not know existed stood alone on the observation deck, watching the enemy fleet through the transparent wall. 300 ships bristling with weapons, confident in their power. She thought about her grandfather who had survived the water wars on Earth. He had told her stories about those times, about how close humanity had come to ending itself, about the lessons they had learned. Trust no one with your survival, he had said. Prepare for the worst, and when the worst comes, hold nothing back. She boarded the last shuttle as the first Terran ships emerged from hyperspace. The fleet detected the new arrivals too late. One moment their sensors showed empty space. The next moment contacts appeared everywhere. Admiral stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Ships were materializing. All around his formation, not dozens. Not hundreds, thousands. Where did they come from? He demanded. How did they hide from our sensors? No one had an answer. The tan ships were smaller than his vessels, but they moved with terrible speed and precision. They did not approach in formation. They did not attempt communication. They simply attacked. The first wave consisted of autonomous weapons platforms, thousands of drones carrying warheads that punch through shields like they were not. Their ships began to die. Watched in horror as the destroyer Fierce Claw exploded, then the cruiser. Endless Night, then a dozen more. His fleet was being torn apart in minutes. Return fire, he screamed. All ships. Return fire, but his weapons could not lock onto targets that moved too fast to track. His communications dissolved into static as tan electronic warfare systems flooded every frequency. In the chaos and the fire, Admiral finally understood the truth. The Terran had not been bluffing. They had never been bluffing, and now it was too late. Lieutenant had served aboard the cruiser Crimson Dawn for 3 years. She was young, ambitious, and proud to serve the Empire. She had believed in the mission. Now she believed in nothing but survival. The bridge around her was chaos. Warning lights flashed from every console. The captain was screaming orders that no one could follow. Half the crew stations were unmanned, their operators dead or injured from the first strikes. Shields at 12%. Someone shouted, "Engine 3 is offline. I cannot reach any other ships. Communications are completely blocked." Gripped her console and tried to make sense of her sensor readings, but the data was impossible. The tan ships moved in patterns that her tactical training had never prepared her for. They did not fight like any species she had studied. They fought like predators hunting wounded prey. A new impact shook the Crimson Dawn. The lights flickered and died, replaced by dim emergency illumination. Heard metal screaming somewhere deep in the ship. Hull breach. On decks 4 through 7, the damage control officer reported. His voice was shaking. "We are venting atmosphere." The captain turned to his first officer. "Can we jump to hyperspace?" "Negative. The jump drive is damaged. We are trapped here." Trapped. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Looked at her display again. The Terran ships had formed a sphere around the fleet, cutting off every escape route. They were picking off vessels one by one, working from the outside in. It was systematic, methodical, almost mechanical in its efficiency. She had expected savagery from a species defending its territory. She had expected desperate attacks, emotional fury, the chaos of a cornered animal. This was none of those things. This was something far worse. This was a species that had practiced extermination until it became routine. Another ship died on her sensors. The battle cruiser Sovereign Will, one of the largest vessels in the fleet. Snort simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there fighting back against the swarm. The next moment there was only debris and expanding gas. "Gods preserve us," whispered the officer beside her. Did not believe the gods were listening anymore. On the bridge of the TNS Prometheus, Captain watched the battle unfold on her tactical display. The engagement was proceeding exactly as simulated. They were brave. She would give them that. They fought hard even as their formation collapsed, but bravery could not overcome the mathematics of absolute superiority. Enemy flagship identified, Tour. Reported the Eternal Dominion, it is. Heavily damaged but still operational. Status of the enemy fleet. 212 ships destroyed, 74 disabled, 14. Still fighting, less than an hour had passed since the battle began, felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only the grim weight of duty performed. Concentrate fire on the remaining active vessels, she ordered, but I want the flagship disabled, not destroyed. Admiral must survive. Torres glanced at her. Captain, he needs to carry a message back to his people. Dead witnesses cannot speak. The Prometheus moved through the debris field, its weapons finding targets with terrible precision. Around it, the other ships of the Second Response Fleet did the same. The Terran doctrine was specific. Once battle began, there was no negotiation. No surrender accepted. The enemy had to be rendered completely incapable of further resistance, but leadership should be preserved when possible. Someone had to go home and explain what happened. Someone had to tell the story. Thought about the story she had grown up with. Her grandmother had been a historian who specialized in Earth's preconflicts. She had taught young about the wars that had shaped humanity. Lesson was always the same. Enemies who believed you were weak would keep coming until they learned the truth. And the only way to teach that truth was through absolute demonstration. Mercy before the battle, warnings and diplomacy, and every chance to avoid conflict. But once the line was crossed, mercy ended. It was a hard doctrine, a brutal doctrine, but it had kept humanity alive for 300 years in a galaxy that did not forgive weakness. Eternal Dominion has lost main power. Tor announced they are drifting. Life signs still present on multiple decks. Dispatch boarding teams. I want Admiral in custody within the hour. Yes, Captain. Leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them again, she would have to make reports, coordinate cleanup operations, and begin the next phase of this terrible business. But for this one moment, she allowed herself to feel the weight of what they had done. 300 ships, 50,000 souls, lives ended because their leaders had refused to listen. It was necessary, she believed that, but necessary things could still be tragic. On the dying Crimson Dawn, Lieutenant crawled through a corridor filled with smoke and sparking wires. The ship was finished. Everyone knew it. The captain had ordered evacuation, but half the escape pods had been destroyed in the attack. She found a functioning pod and climbed inside with 7 other survivors as they launched into space. She watched the Crimson Dawn break apart. Behind them, the pod drifted among the wreckage of the fleet. Everywhere she looked, there were pieces of ships that had been proud and whole just hours ago. Bodies floated in the void. Rescue beacons flashed unanswered, and the tan ships moved through it all like ghosts, silent and efficient, finishing what they had started. Shadow fell across the pod's viewport. Looked up and saw a Terran vessel approaching. It was small and sleek. Nothing like the massive warships that had destroyed the fleet. A shuttle. Perhaps her fellow survivors stirred in fear. They are coming to kill us, one of them said, but the shuttle did not fire. Instead, it matched velocity with the pod and extended a docking arm. Connection was made. Air hissed through the seal. The hatch opened and a human stepped through. He was young, wearing a uniform that did not recognize. His expression was not angry or triumphant. He looked tired, Survivors, he said in accented but clear language, you are now prisoners of the Terran Union. You will not be harmed. Medical attention will be provided. You will be returned to your people when this is over. Stared at him. You are not going to kill us. The human looked at her with something that might have been sadness. The battle is over. You are no longer combatants. We do not murder helpless prisoners. He gestured for them to follow him into the shuttle. Went too shocked to resist. As she passed through the hatch, she looked back at the destruction one last time. This made no sense. The Terran had fought like demons, showing no mercy to the fleet, but now they were rescuing survivors, treating the wounded. She did not understand. But as the shuttle carried her away from the graveyard of her fleet, she began to realize something important. The Terran were not monsters. They were not evil. They were simply a species that had learned exactly how much force was needed to guarantee survival, and exactly when that force should end. That somehow was more terrifying than any monster could have been. The shuttle docked with a larger vessel, and the other survivors were led to a medical bay where human doctors waited. They were treated with professional care, their wounds bandaged, their shock addressed. No one hurt them. No one even raised a voice. And somewhere in the ruins of the Eternal Dominion, Admiral was being dragged from the wreckage of his bridge to answer for his choices. Admiral woke in a small room with white walls and soft lighting. He was lying on a bed that was surprisingly comfortable. His wounds had been treated. Clean bandages covered the burns on his arms. For a moment, he did not remember where he was. Then everything came flooding back. The battle, the screaming of his crew, the impossible speed of the Tan ships, the moment when the Eternal Dominion's bridge had exploded around him and darkness had taken him. He sat up quickly, then groaned as pain shot through his body. He was alive, but his fleet was not. The door opened and a human woman entered. She was middle-aged, with short dark hair and an officer's uniform. 2 armed guards followed her but remained by the door. Admiral, she said, I am captain of the Terran Navy. How are you feeling? Stared at her. This was the enemy, the commander of the force that had destroyed 300 ships in less than an hour. He expected cruelty, arrogance, the gloating of a victor. Instead, she looked at him with calm professionalism. Nothing more. Why am I alive? He asked, pulled a chair close to his bed, and sat down. Because dead witnesses cannot deliver messages. Your survival is intentional. A message to your government, to your people, to anyone who might consider doing what you did. Felt anger rising in his chest. You murdered my fleet, 50,000 soldiers following orders, and you want me to carry your message. Did not flinch. Admiral, your fleet entered our territory despite explicit warnings. You destroyed our beacons. You rejected all attempts at communication. You came to our home with weapons armed and demands ready. She paused. We did not murder your fleet. We defended our people. There is a difference. You call that defense. You outnumbered us more than 10 to 1. Yes, we did. Deliberately leaned forward slightly. Do you know why? Said nothing. Because fair fights get your people killed. Because proportional response invites follow-up attacks. Because the only way to ensure that an enemy never threatens you again is to demonstrate beyond any doubt that attacking you is suicide. She stood and walked to a display screen on the wall. With a gesture, she Activated it, images appeared, ships, fleets, worlds, the Empire, she said. Pointing to the first image, they found humanity when we had only 4 colony. Worlds, they planned to enslave us. We destroyed their invasion fleet then. Their home fleet snorts than every military installation they possessed. They still exist as a species, but they have not threatened anyone in 250 years. More images appeared, the Confederation, the Raiders, the Burning Fleet, 9 civilizations tested humanity before. Yours, 9 civilizations learned what happens when you ignore our warnings. Studied the images, some of those species he recognized that were now a peaceful trading nation that had become reclusive, rarely leaving their home. System, you broke them, he said. Quietly, we removed their ability to threaten us. What they became afterward was their choice. Turned back to him. 5 of those 9 civilizations are now our allies. They learned respect through defeat, and we welcomed them as friends. When they were ready, and the other 4 to no longer exist, they kept attacking until there was nothing left. 2 others chose isolation. We respect their choice and leave them alone. Thought about this, his entire understanding of the galaxy was shifting beneath him. They had built their empire through overwhelming force and the threat of annihilation. They had assumed all other species operated the same way, but humans were different. They did not conquer, they did not expand aggressively, they simply drew a line and dared anyone to cross it. Why are you telling me this? He asked, sat down. Again, because I want you to understand something important. What happened to your fleet was not revenge, it was not hatred, it was not even anger, it was simply the application of a doctrine that has kept humanity alive in a hostile galaxy. She pulled out a small device and placed it on the table between them. This contains records of the battle, every ship destroyed, every weapon fired, every tactical decision. It also contains historical files about humanity's previous conflicts. I want you to study them. I want you to understand exactly what your government sent you into. Did not touch the device. And then what? Then you go home, you stand before your high council and you tell them what happened. You explain that the Terran Union does not want war with the Empire. We have no interest in your territory. We do not seek to rule others. We simply refuse to be victims. You expect them to believe me after this humiliation. I expect them to watch the recordings and draw their own conclusions. What they believe is up to them, but I want them to know the truth. Stood and moved toward the door. Then she paused and turned back. Admiral, I need you to understand one more thing. We could have pushed further after your fleet was destroyed. We had clear paths into Empire space. Our ships are already positioned. We could reach your core worlds within weeks. Felt cold. Then why haven't you? Because we are not conquerors. Because killing your fleet was necessary to protect our people, but invading your territory would be something else entirely. We choose to stop here. We choose to offer your government a chance to end this peacefully. She opened the door. A diplomatic vessel is traveling to your border right now. It carries our terms. Your people can accept them, and we can begin building something better than this, or they can refuse, and we can continue until one of our civilizations no longer exists. She met his eyes one final time. I hope they choose wisely, Admiral. I do not want to kill any more of your people. But I will if I must, we all will, she left. The door closed behind her, was alone with the device in his thoughts. Far away in the great council chamber of the chaos reigned. The news had arrived. Hours ago, the third expansion fleet was destroyed. Admiral was captured, 300 ships and 50,000 soldiers gone in less than an hour. Grand Executive stood before the assembled council, his face pale, his hands trembling. He had ordered this mission, he had approved plan. This disaster belonged to him. How is this possible? Demanded one of the counselors. Our intelligence said they were weak. Our intelligence was wrong, Elder said quietly. I tried to warn you, we knew nothing about these Tren except what they allowed us to see. What do we do now? Another counselor asked. They have our admiral. They have destroyed our fleet. Are they coming for us next? As if in answer, a communication officer burst into the chamber. Grand Executive, a Terran vessel has arrived at our border. They are requesting permission to send diplomats. The room fell silent, looked at the message in the officer's hands. The Terran were not attacking, they were asking to talk. What kind of beings destroy a fleet and then ask for negotiation? He whispered. Elder rose from her seat, her old bones creaking with the effort. The kind who meant every word of their warning, she said. The kind who fight only when forced and stop the moment the threat is ended. The kind we should have listened to from the beginning. She walked slowly toward the communication officer. Tell them their diplomats are welcome, and may whatever wisdom remains in this council guide us through what comes next. The officer bowed and ran to deliver the message. On the border, the Terran diplomatic vessel waited patiently for a response. Inside, Ambassador Michael reviewed his notes and prepared for the most important negotiation of his career. Peace was still possible, but only if they were willing to learn. The diplomatic hall had been built to intimidate visitors. Its ceilings rose 50 meters high, covered in murals depicting imperial victories. Its walls were lined with captured banners from conquered species. The floor was polished stone imported from a dozen worlds. Ambassador Michael walked through it. Without looking up once, he was flanked by 2 aides and accompanied by a security detail that carried no visible weapons. They did not need them. Everyone in this room knew what the Tren were capable of. Grand Executive waited at the far end of the hall, seated on an elevated platform surrounded by the full High Council. His ceremonial robes were immaculate, but his eyes were hollow. He had not slept since the news arrived. Stopped at the designated speaking point and offered a slight bow, respectful but not submissive. Grand Executive, honored council, thank you for receiving us. Studied the human. For a long moment, he was not what the executive had expected. Middle-aged, unremarkable appearance, wearing simple diplomatic attire. He did not look like the representative of a species that had just destroyed 300 warships. Ambassador said, his voice carefully controlled. You have requested this meeting. Speak. Nodded. I will be direct. Grand Executive, the Terran Union does not want war with the Empire. We never wanted this conflict. Your fleet entered our space despite clear warnings. We defended ourselves. Now we wish to end hostilities and establish a lasting peace. A counselor to left leaned forward. Peace you slaughtered our fleet and speak of peace with respect. Counselor, your fleet came to Slaughter us, we simply proved better at it. His tone remained calm, but we have no interest in continuing this violence. We are not seeking to expand into empire territory. We are not demanding tribute or submission. We simply want recognition of our sovereignty and security guarantees for our people. Elder spoke from her position at the council's edge. What exactly are your terms? Ambassador reached into his jacket and produced a small data chip. An aide carried it to the platform and handed it to. The terms are detailed in that document, but I can summarize. First, formal recognition of Terran territorial boundaries by the Empire. Second, establishment of a demilitarized zone along our shared border. Third, reparations for the cost of our defensive response to be paid over a period of 50 years. Fourth, return of all captured personnel on both sides. Looked at the chip without touching it, and if we refuse, did not hesitate, then we continue until one of our civilizations can no longer resist. Our fleets are already positioned. We have been preparing for this possibility for 300 years. We would prefer not to use that preparation, but we will if necessary. Silence filled the hall. Another counselor stood. This is blackmail. You attack us and then demand payment. Your fleet attacked us, corrected gently. We have recordings of the entire engagement, including Admiral's refusal to respond to Hales and his destruction of our warning beacons. We did not start this conflict, but we are prepared to finish it. The counselor opened his mouth to argue further, but raised a hand. Enough. The Grand Executive looked old suddenly, burdened by the weight of a catastrophe he had caused. Ambassador, you say you do not wish to conquer us. Why should we believe that? Every powerful species seeks to expand. It is the nature of civilization. Consider the question carefully before answering. Grand Executor, humans nearly destroyed themselves before we ever reached the stars. We had wars that killed hundreds of millions. We poison our own world. We came within years of extinction multiple times. We did not survive by conquering others. We survived by learning painfully that survival requires restraint as much as strength. He took a step forward, his voice softening. We do not want your worlds. We do not want to rule over your people. We want only to live in peace and to be left alone. Every species that has respected that wish has found us to be reliable partners and loyal friends. Every species that has tested our resolve has learned that we will pay any price to protect our own. He gestured toward the data chip. Those terms are not punishment, Grand Executor. They are the foundation for a relationship between equals. Accept them, and in a generation, your and ours might meet as friends rather than enemies. Looked at the chip for a long moment. Then he looked at his council. He saw fear in some faces, anger in others, but in Elder's eyes he saw something else. Hoping we will deliberate, he said. Finally, you will have our answer within 3 days. Bowed again. We will wait, Grand Executive. We are patient people. He turned and walked back through the great hall, past the murals of conquest in the banners of the defeated. None of it impressed him, none of it frightened him. Humanity had faced worse and survived. 3 days later, the Empire accepted the Terran terms. The ceremony was held on a space station at the border between their territories. Grand Executive signed the treaty alongside Ambassador. Admiral stood as a witness, his face unreadable. After the signing approached, "I have studied your history," the admiral said. "I understand now why you are the way you are, but there is something I still do not understand." "What is that, Admiral? You had us completely at your mercy. Your ships could have continued into our space. You could have broken our empire as you broke our fleet. Why did you stop?" Thought about the question, he looked out the station's windows at the stars beyond. "Because breaking your empire would not make us safer," he said. "It would only make us conquerors, and conquerors eventually meet someone stronger. We have seen that pattern repeat across history in our own past and in the galaxy around us." He turned back to, "We do not want to rule others, Admiral. We simply refuse to be ruled ourselves. As long as your empire respects that, we have no quarrel with you." Studied the human's face, searching for deception. He found none. "You are a strange species," he said at last. "We get that a lot." 5 years after the treaty was signed, the first trading ships entered Terran space. They were met with professional courtesy and fair dealing. Commerce began slowly at first, then with growing confidence. 10 years later, an academic visited Earth to study human history. She snorts. Wrote a book that became required reading in imperial schools. It was titled Understanding the Terran Lessons from the Border War. 20 years later, the Empire and the Terran Union signed a mutual defense pact. Former enemies became allies against new threats that emerged from the galactic darkness. Lieutenant, now Admiral, attended the signing ceremony. She thought about the pod drifting among wreckage, the human soldier who had offered mercy instead of death, the strange species that fought like demons and healed like angels. She finally understood them, she thought, or at least she understood enough. The warning beacons still floated at the Terran borders, broadcasting their message in every known language. New species discovered them and wondered what kind of beings would mark their territory with such blunt words. Some ignored the warnings and crossed the line. They learned the same lesson they had learned and all the others, but most listened. Most looked at the beacons and the small territory beyond and chose to go around. They did not understand everything about humanity, but they understood enough. The Terran did not threaten. They promised, and their promises were always kept on Earth, in a quiet garden behind the memorial to all humanity's wars. Children played in the sunshine. They knew nothing of the treaties signed in their name, the battles fought for their safety, the generations of sacrifice that had bought them this peace. They only knew that the sky was blue, the grass was soft, and tomorrow was full of possibility. That was enough. That had always been enough. That was what humanity fought for, and that was why they would never stop.